Hello everyone, this is David. Tonight's movie that we watched is Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah. Now this is interesting because this is the reintroduction of the monster Ghidorah to the Heisei era. He is no longer a space monster. He is now a created monster by humans from the future. So that's interesting. As well as we get technically two new monsters and a revamped Godzilla. Godzilla gets an upgrade. He's more or less the same, but he's supposedly bigger and more ferocious. But we also get to see Godzilla's origin. We finally get to find out what created him, and that was the Godzillasaurus, which is basically just a dinosaur. And a bonus monster in the form of Mecha King Ghidorah. Technically not a different monster, it's a cyborg Ghidorah from the future that travels back in time that is under the control of humans that they use to fight Godzilla. Quite interesting. He's got a lot of abilities. It's kind of like if you took Mechagodzilla and Ghidorah and merged them into one character. That's basically the idea. So Godzilla's most powerful foe, squared. That's Mecha King Ghidorah. And as a side note, I remember my friend had a Godzilla video game back when we were younger. That was like Kaiju Daikisen or something like that, where it was like Street Fighter, but instead of fighting, Ken and Ryu and all that, you fought Godzilla or Anguirus or any of the other monsters. My favorite, personally, was always Mecha King Ghidorah. But that's just a little side note. I didn't know until much later where he actually came from. I always tried to find him in the original Showa era, and, well, he's not in there. He's in this movie, so I didn't even know till I was considerably older that these movies existed, which is kind of sad, all things said and done. But again, this is back before we had the internet and whatnot, so we couldn't look this stuff up. So let's talk about Ghidorah and Godzilla are basically the same. Let's talk about Mecha King Ghidorah, because he's the new one. So he's got a replacement middle head. His middle head's a robot head. He shoots a different type of bio-lightning of some sort. He also has shock lances, basically. He can fire out tasers. And he has a giant thing that comes out of his chest to pin Godzilla into place and electrocute him. So that's all pretty interesting. Also, because of he's from the future, he has the ability to travel in time. So that's pretty cool. Although that's not really an intrinsic to him power, but still. He's a time traveler. Although he is also piloted by one of the characters, so he's not really a monster in and of his own right. So anyway, let's get on to this movie, because this one's kind of interesting. So basically what ends up happening is a UFO shows up, and it lands, it does a bunch of stuff, and everyone's freaking out because there's a UFO. And it lands, and it turns out that there are people from the future, and they've come to tell Japan nowadays, or circa 1991, 1992, that disaster is coming and that it can be averted if we move Godzilla. So they need to borrow a few people from their time period for some reason to do this. And the three people is this author, the scientist, and Miki Sugusa again. So that's kind of interesting. They bring those characters together. I forget their exact names, but in the end, it's whatever. It's what it is. I'm here for the monsters mostly, not for the people. And, whatever. So they find out where Godzilla is, or where he's from, and they're going to get rid of him. And so where is he from? Well, it turns out during the Gilbert and Marshall Islands campaign, a group of Japanese soldiers were on this island in between them called Lagos Island, where the Godzillasaurus lived. And he saved them from the Americans, which is kind of funny. Godzillasaurus beats up all the Americans, he kills all the Americans, which on one hand I'm kind of oh man, he killed all the Americans, but at the same time I'm yeah, but this is a Japanese movie, and really when you think about it, in any movie that is made in America, it's yeah, we're killing all the bad guys, and the bad guys are anyone who's not us. So at the same time, I'm okay, this is fine. It's nothing graphic or explicit, and friggin' killed by dinosaurs isn't so bad. But anyway, so they basically go back in time. They see all that. They Godzillasaurus gets beat up by the American battleships. He goes back. He's dying, but he will become Godzilla when the hydrogen bomb is tested. So that's a thing that happens. So they go back, and what they do is they transport him away, so he doesn't turn into Godzilla. So keep in mind that they're altering history now. So now no one should know about Godzilla. What they leave behind instead are these three little creatures called Dorats, and they're basically like these little puppets that look kind of cute and kind of frightening at the same time. And they leave them behind, and they're going to create King Ghidorah by putting them into the same test that Godzilla went through that mutated him into a giant monster. And they go back into the future, and now Godzilla's disappeared, even though everyone remembers him. Don't know why that is, because if he never existed, no one should remember him. And now King Ghidorah exists, and King Ghidorah is attacking Japan. Because, as we've learned, the people that show up in spaceships, not just aliens, but people that show up in spaceships, are here to fuck you, no matter what they do. And it turns out one of the time travelers doesn't agree with this, and this is a part for me which I never understood. This is a good movie, but this is the one part where I'm like, what? Why? So she's Japanese, and she is upset that they went back in time to destroy Japan. Okay, fair enough. But that was their explicit plan, and in fact, she was the one that let the Dorats out and left them on the island to be mutated into King Ghidorah. So I can't... She's like, oh, I don't want to do this. And it's like, okay, but you already did it. Like, you're the whole reason this happened. Why, if you had this big of a problem with it, did you do it? I do not understand. I'm confused. Okay, so suffice it to say, King Ghidorah is going on a rampage, and basically the future people are like, you have to take our computer and basically swear fealty to us, or we'll wipe you out with this giant monster. And meanwhile, Japan's trying to find an answer. They're like, okay, we're not going to surrender to these guys, because that's ridiculous. What can we do? Well, we can make Godzilla. What do we got? And the Japanese are like, well, we have this secret military project of this nuclear submarine that has missiles on it that's not stored anywhere near Japan that we could always use. And so they go ahead with something akin to that, and Godzilla turns into Super Godzilla, basically, because he's mutated with more powerful radiation than before. Apparently, if you just throw radiation onto Godzilla, he just turns huge. It's like Bruce Banner. So that happens. Now Godzilla and King Ghidorah fight, and Godzilla, they say, is quite a bit bigger than he was before, although I don't know how they remember the previous Godzilla, but sure. And they fight, and Godzilla kicks the crap out of Ghidorah, destroys it, like blasts his head off. Meanwhile, there's a subplot of the Japanese character, I can't remember her name, that is from the future, and she doesn't want to help them anymore. So she helps the Japanese solve the problem, and she reprograms this android, M11, to basically, instead of working for the bad guys, working for the good guys. Oh yeah, her name's Emmy. Sorry, Emmy. So she's working with that, and they decide to teleport their future ship in front of Godzilla after he kills King Ghidorah and blows them up. So they're all dead. And then they go into the future, and they find King Ghidorah resting on the bottom of the ocean. And now, meanwhile, Godzilla's going apeshit, and he's destroying everything now, because the only thing that could stop him was Ghidorah. And, well, Ghidorah's not here anymore, so, it's like you were damned if you do, damned if you don't. So now, Godzilla's trashed in the sea, so what are we going to do? So, Emmy rebuilds Mecha King Ghidorah in the future, comes back in time, fights Godzilla. Okay, fair enough. Long battle, Mecha King Ghidorah gets pretty beat up, Godzilla gets pretty trashed. Mecha King Ghidorah grabs Godzilla, flies him off into the middle of the ocean, shocks him. The Mecha King Ghidorah can't sustain the punishment that Godzilla's putting it under. They crash into the ocean. Emmy escapes in her little ship that was in the middle. It was basically like the heart of King Ghidorah. They escape into the future, and that is Godzilla versus King Ghidorah. This one is definitely a good entry into the series. I know a lot of people rate it very highly and put it in their, at the very least, their top 10, if not close to the top, like top 3. I definitely recommend watching this one. It's very good. If you don't like time travel, you might not like this one as much because it'll start making your head hurt. But even so, like, it's still pretty good to see King Ghidorah back in action, and him pretty good. The upgrade is pretty awesome. Mecha King Ghidorah is pretty fun. The upgraded, fiercer, meaner Godzilla is nice. Although, you know, he was already pretty mean. So, there's a couple of subplots I kind of didn't get around to addressing. The leader of the Japanese that were on the island is now a important businessman, and he has like this kinship with Godzilla, but the new Godzilla just destroys him. Like, he's like looking at him, and Godzilla looks back, and then just atomic breath, you're dead. So that's kind of sad, but other than that, there's the subplot with them breaking away from the aliens. Or not the aliens, because they're time travelers, but whatever. Anyway, so there's that too. But definitely check this one out for yourself. Make your own decisions. I rate this one highly. Check it out. Alright. Good night, or before we say goodnight, the next one up, Godzilla Mothra, Battle for Earth. Alright. Or just Godzilla versus Mothra. At least they're not calling it Godzilla versus the Thing. Alright. Good night, folks.